The first patch of Warhammer 3 is finally here, so let's look at the changes. Seems like the patch notes are going to be quite long, but I don't expect any new additions to the game, just a lot of polishing. Now up top, there are highlighted changes, fixes to crashes and performance. This will help some a lot more than others. Huge changes to the Realm of Chaos mechanics, we'll get to that later. What seems to be a buff to the Demons of Chaos faction, specifically their legendary lord. One of my personal favorites, unit responsiveness, which means they should turn around and move a little bit faster. The charge reflection bug has been fixed, and I will take personal responsibility for that, along with some balance changes and tweaks to domination mode. So indeed, we're looking at some nice changes that polish the game without too many changes to the core gameplay. Now I'm going to gloss over some of the less exciting changes so I can focus on the important stuff. I'll have a link to the full patch notes in the description. Starting off with the bug fixes, the biggest one is the fix to the Alt-Tab crash. Some graphics fixes too, but there's nothing too exciting in this section. But what is notable, they did increase the audio on lead belchers and iron blasters. Much more important for me, and likely many for you, there have been changes to the gameplay mechanics. Corruption traits are easier to remove now. You just have to be in a place with low corruption. This means your lord can be much more active on the map while they get rid of the trait at the same time. We no longer have to worry about Slaaneish's tech tree bug or the supply lines bug. I don't need to explain what the bugs are, but if you know about them, you'll be happy that they're gone. But other than those two major bugs, there aren't too many crazy changes, just some small quality of life. Some notable ones being better line of sight for towers on a single map. Would have wished this for other maps too, but I'm sure it'll come in time. But alright, looking at campaign, this is going to be a pretty long list. The prologue just got a bunch of fixes, nothing really to see there. But for the Realms of Chaos, we have quite a bit. Negative traits are half as impactful now. You'll no longer get negative traits if you're going to your own god's realm. And here are some big ones. Beating the survival battle will remove the negative trait you get from the realm. So basically, most people won't have to worry about getting the traits unless they're leaving Slaaneish's realm early. It's also much easier to stop the AI from winning the game now, where basically you can intercept them before they end the game. This was possible before, but now when you intercept them, they also lose all of their souls, which sets the faction back maybe 100 turns. This is such a large setback, you can easily ignore the souls mechanic and focus on the campaign map instead. And speaking of ignoring the Realm of Chaos mechanics, protection buildings will now stop rifts from spawning. This is a huge quality of life change and makes it even easier to focus on expanding instead of the Realms of Chaos. But it looks like CA didn't do the Realms of Chaos dirty either. Every time you claim a soul, you get some pretty nice buffs. Plus 8 control in all provinces, along with 15 growth and a 10% income boost. This means it's pretty worth it to do the Realms of Chaos even if you are focusing on expanding. And it looks like on top of some minor tweaks and changes to Nurgle's realm, and in general, Tzeentch's realm will be getting a bit easier. The realm will now have healing points, which makes life a lot easier there. As for Be'lakor, you no longer have to keep him after you complete a campaign, and I must say, it's pretty worth it not to keep Be'lakor, because the bonuses are a permanent +3 to hero capacity, an extra 14 levels to heroes and lords, +5 wins magic, which is less exciting, but +7 control. And on top of that, a huge bonus to growth and income, which should make the rest of the campaign pretty smooth. And while I doubt Be'lakor is going to see a lot of play after this, the Demons of Chaos will. Against some units, he's going to be doing twice as much damage, and he'll be twice as tanky too. Though aside from the melee attack and melee defense changes, everything else is pretty minor. And also what they've done, they've nerfed his various body parts to make him more or less the same at the start of the campaign. But once you start replacing those body parts, he should be much stronger. And as for the various Demon Prince body parts, they basically got buffed across the board. They're all pretty minor, so nothing to get too excited about. But remember, his baseline buffs make the Demon Prince a lot stronger. But finally, that's the campaign out of the way. What do we have for battles? Looks like Penumbral Pendulum has finally been nerfed along with its Overcast variant to do 50% less damage with its base cast, and its Overcast got hit even harder. Nevertheless, I still expect the spell to be quite strong since it'll bring units to half HP instead of 0. Now as for unit responsiveness, there are some fixes, but CA will not be fixing every problem in that category. Instead, we should see a change to infantry units. They should turn to face enemies a bit better, and some changes to ranged units who should be firing more in odd situations than they were before. It doesn't look like they changed everything for ranged units though, so they might not feel as good as the Warhammer 2 counterparts yet. Some nice quality of life changes though. Guard mode will no longer turn on when you lock control groups, and charge reflection will now only apply when bracing. Onto faction changes, let's look at one unit at a time. The Exalted Lord of Change now has Greater Arcane Conduit. This makes makes them a lot better. Iron blasters will have more spread to their shots while only doing a little bit less damage. This might actually make them stronger than before, but they'll definitely be weaker against single entities. Gorgers will deal less armor piercing damage and have fewer models, which should more or less bring them in line with other units. And also fire bellies and garrisons will now have spells. Now I said iron blasters might have actually been buffed, but their gold got vastly increased all the way to 1,750 gold. With a change like that, I think they're much better balanced now, but they're still probably a very good unit. And of course, this is a change to multiplayer only, so if you're playing campaign, this doesn't matter. As for Cathay, we have a page of changes. The harmony radius got increased by 30%, which is huge. This means two units providing harmony to each other can rotate without running into each other now. Skyjunks got a little bit more ammo and they can drop bombs twice as fast now, but I don't think this changes the unit very much. Sky Lanterns, on the other hand, should be a completely different beast now. They now have the shield breaker effect, which makes Cathay way better against shielded armies. And as for Cathay in multiplayer, it looks like there's been some cost reductions. The War Compass is now dramatically cheaper as a mount and a unit, but it's still probably not that good. But what's nice is that Peasant Archers are a good deal cheaper now, more in line with Bretonnian Peasant Archers, which is a good sign. As for Tzeentch, his barriers should now recharge a lot slower, and you'll have to make a dedicated choice to leave combat for them to regenerate. Before, they would sometimes regenerate in combat if a unit missed a few too many attacks. Arcane Surge and Warp Flame have been nerfed, but the changes aren't big enough to really matter. And this one's pretty huge. Forsaken of Tzeentch no longer have insane magic resist values. This is huge for multiplayer, but for single player it doesn't matter as much. Exalted Flamers also got a nifty range increase, but I don't think this is enough to make them a good unit. Their main problem is that they lack high damage against multi-model units, and extra range isn't gonna give that. As for Tzeentch in multiplayer, Exalted Flamers got a cost increase, which is pretty strange to me. I feel like the unit's pretty bad, so this only makes them more rare. But on the other hand, I could see Flamers being pretty good versus ranged heavy factions with that extra range boost, so maybe this is warranted. Now for Kislev, Kossars are a lot more maneuverable now, and light war sleds will actually have light armor now. This means they'll be taking a lot more damage from ranged fire, and if they ever get stuck in infantry, they should take more damage there too. Elemental Bears have also been buffed by 10 melee defense, which is a pretty big buff, specifically against chaff. The Elemental Bear should no longer take that much damage from low tier units. And it looks like Little Grom got a buff too, but the changes are so insignificant, I don't think it's going to increase the play rate of it. And wow, look at that. Light war sleds got a huge cost increase, and on top of the armor reduction, I think people are just going to take heavy war sleds now. As for the Elemental Bear, it got a good deal cheaper, so we should see that a lot more often, probably as a staple in the Kislev roster. Now for Nurgle, his infantry went from extremely slow to only a little bit slow. Still, this will make Nurgle feel a little bit better to play, but it doesn't really change much about the faction. There were some ammunition increases too for Exalted Plague Bearers and Plague Drones, but none of that is too notable. Instead, the ammunition on Kugath is what we want to be looking at. An extra 13 ammunition is absolutely huge for him, and I expect Kugath to be much stronger than he was before. As for Nurgle in multiplayer, we see cheaper prices across the board for his slow units and flyers. The changes to Exalted Plague Bearers probably having the most impact. They were treading the line of viable before, and now I think they're quite good. As for Slanesh, we see no changes, and that's because CA doesn't want to muck up balance too much. And as for Khorne, it seems like they're happy where he is, and he hasn't been changed. Now as for Domination, it looks like there's going to be some high impact changes coming to the game. For one, they've announced 2 new maps. One of the win more mechanics has been removed, but it looks like the other one might be staying. We'll get into that. And as for supplies, it looks like they're tweaking how that's gained. As for starting armies, they're going to be larger, which makes battles more exciting. But what are the specific changes? Well, for one, it looks like the 2 new Domination maps are going to be extremely open. This will be a nice change of pace from the maps we have right now. And as for these specific changes, your starting army is going to be a little bit larger, but really not by that much compared to how it was before. You also have to be further behind in tickets to enjoy the comeback mechanic, but when you do hit that limit, the mechanic will be stronger than it was before. However, with an overall increase to supplies, this change should be felt a lot less. And that's an extra 500 initial supplies and an extra 4 per second by default. This seems a little bit bit higher than the supplies you would gain by damaging units, which they remove. So overall, I expect domination battles to be a little bit larger than before, but basically the same as they were before. Also, manual targeting has been removed in multiplayer. There was an oversight before, which let your units fire twice as fast, and it looks like they fixed up a few bugs here too. So overall, the patch didn't have too many crazy changes, and instead, it more or less polished what we already had. I'm happy about the campaign changes, since it means you can enter the realms of chaos at your own pace instead of having to rush them. This means there's now an option to play an expansionist campaign without feeling bad about it, and you can also enter the realms of chaos without feeling bad about that too. The domination changes definitely leave a lot to be desired though, but the fact that the most dominant units in multiplayer have been appropriately adjusted means that multiplayer is in a workable state, but I don't think the meta is going to change dramatically. Now, if you enjoyed this quick analysis on the patch notes, you'll likely enjoy the other videos I make on units and spells. They are short and straight to the point, so check one of them out in the bottom right.